Hey, this is Jamey with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to discuss my top 10 favorite roll and write games. Also, kind of becoming known as random write games because many of these games don't actually use dice. They use maybe cards to flip over, and all players use those cards to then write down something on their personal mat. These games are, I'm specifically going after games where you are writing down something on an individual pad of paper, whether it's with a pencil or a whiteboard, white erase marker. Opposed to games like another video that I did recently where you are writing on something like in Treasure Island, but you're not writing on your own specific thing and creating something on your own specific mat. There's a bit of crossover there, but I've tried to delineate the two. I will do a design discussion at the end of this list about just a few aspects of roll and write games. I'm going to say roll and write games, but let's jump right to the top 10 list. My number 10 is one that I debated putting on here. Oh, and I should mention that there are a lot of these games, and I haven't played a lot of them. So I'm just going to work off the games that I actually have played. With, I think, Fleet, the dice game, being the one at the top of the list that I really want to play, and that might have made this list, but I haven't played that yet. So my number 10 is actually a print and play game called Birdsong. There's someone who was inspired by Wingspan, and they designed a print and play game about bird watching, and it is really, really cool. I highly recommend looking on Board Game Geek for it because it's a really, really cool game. And one of my favorite things about it is that each player has their own unique mat. The mats are essentially the same, but the birds on them are different. So the mechanisms of the mats, I think the gameplay are almost identical. Maybe each one has a slightly different goal, but I like that each mat represents a different continent with different birds on it. So even though you're playing with, when you play the game twice, you'll be collecting and searching for different birds than the previous time you played. Really cool twist. Check out the rest about Birdsong. It's about kind of completing rows and columns of birds and getting bonuses from doing so. And even though you're working with six-sided dice, you're also gaining birds so that you could add extra pips to the dice so that you can collect even more rare birds. It represents birds that get more and more rare require you to actually add more pips to the dice to get up to like 9 to be able to see a really rare bird. So that's Birdsong, my number 10. My number 9 is a game called Qwixx. I've only played Qwixx once or twice. It's been a while since I played it. Really vague memory about this game. It's a very simple kind of little bit of math in it, style roll and write game. But and I didn't even look it up for this video. I just remember enjoying playing it, and it's a game that I would play again. But I put it pretty low on this list because it has been a while since I played it. My number 8 is Rolling Ranch, which I do have and I do enjoy, and I plan to continue enjoying it. This is a game where you are creating a ranch, as you can kind of see here from this layout. Every player has a layout like this, where you are writing down different things in these hexes. So you have these different pins where you're trying to put animals in the pins, and those animals can breed if certain breeding dice come up. I love the cute little dice here. I'll show them to you since I do have this box. So I love seeing custom dice in these roll and write games. Numbers are great on dice, but it's fun to see these custom dice options too. So here's what your map might look like at the end of a game of Rolling Ranch. And I love the choices in the game because the dice give you the option to maybe work towards a building that you can use, one of these buildings that you can then put down in one of your hexes, or you can just use the animal and put it right down in there. You're scoring each of these different pins at the end, pens at the end of the game, not pins, pens, based on the number of animals that are in that pen. Only one animal type per pen. And here are the cute dice. I love these cute little dice that have different choices on them because you're choosing one die for one thing and the other die for the other thing. So you're choosing like the number. If you choose the number on this die, then you're choosing the animal on this die and vice versa. I like that little choice here. So even though all players are working off these same dice, you're still making a choice as to which dice you use for the number versus the animal, or if you're just going to use the resources on those dice. I actually really like that pairing mechanism in the game. That seems to me to be a really clever use of dice in a roll and write game. That's why Rolling Ranch is my number 8 favorite roll and write game. My number 7 is Railroad Inc., which I don't own. I recently did a video about that. It's kind of a route building game, or it is a route building game. We're trying to connect edges of the map with a big route of roads and railroads. it's a clever game. As I mentioned in the video, my favorite thing is that there are these bonus actions that you can use to that are very powerful to help you build intersections at the right time, right when you need them, and you get to decide to use them. You can try to use them early in the game to give you flexibility for the rest of the game, or use them late in the game when you're kind of backed into the corner and you really need a specific thing to sketch in. And again, similar to Rolling Ranch, Railroad Ink uses custom dice as well, which just look really cool on the table. So that's number 7, Railroad Ink. My number 6 is Cosmic Run Rapid Fire. It says 1 to 2 players. I've only played this with 2 players. You have a player mat that looks like this, and this is just a lot of fun. It's a dice drafting game between 2 players where you are racing to get through these asteroid fields to end up at these different planets. And along the way, you are gaining one-time bonuses that you can use whenever you want, and you're also kind of gaining, they're kind of like upgrades, but it's really just getting more points and gaining, there are things that you can use, but you're also getting points for upgrading them throughout the game. And it's a fun race game. It's essentially, it's a game where you're racing to these different planets, trying to get there before the other players, and to end up with more points than the other player at the end of the game. And I just had a lot of fun with that. I love that it's just 2-player and that it's this dice drafting mechanism. I think that works really well for Cosmic Run Rapid Fire. That's why it's my number 6. All right, we're on to the top 5 here. Number 5 I don't own. It's a game called Cat Cafe. And really I should say that numbers 8, 7, 6, and 5 were pretty close. It was really hard to figure out what order to put them in. But I put Cat Cafe at the top because it's just a little charming game where you are positioning cats on these cat towers and positioning different things on these cat towers throughout the game. It's just a cute, pleasant game, and I love cats. You can see, who is that back there? Walter's back there on the chair right now. So any game with cats is gonna get an extra notch in my book. Number 4 is Welcome To. So this is one of the roll and write games that really set off the roll and write craze a few years ago. In Welcome To, it is a flip and write game. So you are flipping 3 cards, and those cards are paired with numbers on 3 other cards, and you are selecting one of those pairs. So like these 3 pairs, you're selecting one of those pairs and writing the number somewhere in your suburbia that you're building, and using the bonus if you want to also increase your points for the end of the game. It's this game with a lot of there's a lot of progression. There's a lot of flexibility at the beginning of the game that gets tighter and tighter as you play. And every game feels a little different based on the progression that you chose. Are you going after parks? Are you trying to get a lot of points from parks? Are you trying to fill in all the pools and optimizing pools? Are you trying to get better multipliers for the groups that you're fencing in throughout the game? Welcome To, I've really enjoyed playing this to the point that I've run out of paper in this game, and we've replaced them with laminated mats because we played the heck out of it. And that's Welcome To, my number 4, which was very close to Ganz Schon Clever, my number 3. This is, I forget the English translation for this, something about being clever. Ganz Schon Clever is a roll and write game where you are stringing together these combos. So if you're completing one thing, completing like a row or a column, and then suddenly it gives you a bonus to write down another number in another place, and maybe that gives you another bonus to write down another number. It's this multiplicative effect that happens based on the way the tracks and the crosshatches in the game, the grids in this game are designed to just make you feel really good and positive. It feels really good to get those combos going later in the game, where you're on your turn, you're doing this and that and this, and it happens really fast. It's not really slowing down the game to get those combos. That's why Ganz Schon Clever just gets my brain going. I couldn't put it any lower than number 3 because I really enjoy playing Ganz Schon Clever. My number 1 and 2 were really difficult to decide. I ended up going with kind of the default answer, but it was very close. And by that I mean that Cartographers is really new to me. I've only played it a few times, but I'm loving it, really loving it. I ended up putting it at number 2. It probably could have been number 1, but it's just really close. So I'm going to say it's really close between 1 and 2, but officially I'm putting Cartographers at number 2. Cartographers is a game where you are designing a map of a kingdom to present to the ruler. King or queen? Queen, presenting to the queen. And it does everything that I want in a game. It has these really nice variable scoring methods that's also used in Isle of Skye, another one of my favorite games. It gives you this wonderful artifact at the end of the game of this kingdom that you drew. And it has this awesome interaction of the game that I haven't seen in other roll and write games, where at certain times, if a monster shows up, you're going to pass your entire mat to the player on the left or the right, and they are going to draw the monster on your mat. Which disrupts what you were doing, might give you some negative points, but just adds a really nice level of interaction to the game that you don't normally see in roll and write games. I'm really loving Cartographers, and I look forward to continuing to play it, and it might inch up to my number one in the future. But my number one, like the default number one, the game that I love and continue to love is On Tour. On Tour is a roll and write game. It's one of the few roll and write games on this list that comes with whiteboard mats. So it comes with these beautiful big whiteboard pads that you're drawing on. And even though it comes with these, it is the style of roll and write game that I'll discuss more in a moment that is infinitely scalable. Any number of players can play this game at a time because everyone's looking at the same dice. They're writing down numbers in an empty state on this map. And at the end of the game, you were trying to draw a line connecting numbers in ascending order without breaking that path and trying to get the longest route together. You get bonus points. Certain cards will show like a specific state on them, and so if you choose that state while that card's in play, you get to circle that state, and that gives you a bonus point at the end of the game. It's super easy to teach and play. It just makes me happy every time I play it, and it's kind of just, even though it's a tense type game, it's also really relaxing to play because there's not a lot to think about, and that's why On Tour is my number one favorite roll and write game. I shouldn't say that. There's a lot to think about, but it doesn't cause mental overload. So it's a game that I'm always happy to get to the table because I'm not always up for a heavy game. So a few game design discussion here, points here. One is the idea of having a game where you have an artifact at the end of the game, a permanent artifact that you've written on, versus a game where you have dry erase, where you get to erase it at the end of the game. I think there are pros and cons to both, and Cartographers and On Tour are probably like the top candidates to show this because it is really satisfying to have this permanent artifact at the end of the game of Cartographers that you've written on. The downside being that you have limited pieces of paper in here. At a certain point, if I keep playing Cartographers, I'm going to run out of paper, and I'll have to ideally order more from the publisher. And so I think that's a publisher can address the issue of replayability by offering on their website the opportunity to buy more pads of paper and just get that rather than just get the whole game. I think that's a clever way to do it. As far as the games with roll and write games with dry erase markers, the upside is that you have this reusable thing. There's no limit to the number of times that you can replay the game unless your dry erase markers run or dry out, which they do, but then you can just buy new dry erase markers, which I have for Just One, which is not a roll and write game, but it uses dry erase. I've had to buy more markers for that. The downside being that you don't have the artifact. You can't look back and see what you did on a previous game unless you took a photo of it. So that's something that you kind of lose in the dry erase realm. One of the other things I want to discuss is how one of the nice things about roll and write games is that they don't cost as much to make and therefore don't cost as much to sell. So you can they offer a much lower price point. Like Cartographers could have used a ton of tiles that you put on the board, could have gone the tapestry route and gone with big miniatures that you put on the board, but it didn't really need that. I think the game is the better for it, for being a lot more cost effective and having you gain the artifact from being able to actually write on something, whereas if you were placing pieces somewhere, you wouldn't have that artifact at the end of the game. I don't think every game is better for having this artifact style write method. I think I do love games with big table presence and big components and whatnot, but I think at times I think this is a good reminder to me as a designer that bigger isn't always better, and that sometimes having a slimmed down component method can actually be better for the game. At the same time, though, I think you have a certain perception that goes along with roll and write games that they won't be super expensive. So I think it would be very difficult for a publisher to publish a roll and write game that is over even $40 is pushing it. I'm not quite sure what On Tour sells for, but I think in the like 20 to 30 realm is probably the max that I would want to spend on a roll and write game. And I'm curious to hear if you share that same perception. This is something that I've discussed in regards to a couple of these games, the idea of roll and write games that infinitely scale versus those that don't. And this is what really opened my eyes when I played Welcome to and On Tour. This is when I really started to fall in love with the idea of roll and write games, because they scale infinitely. And any number of people can play these at a time. Because there is no interaction in the game. You're all just rolling, or someone is rolling the dice. You could do this on a camera halfway across the world. Someone is rolling the dice and everyone is writing down something simultaneously. There's no interaction between players, except for maybe sometimes comparing majorities. Which is a level of interaction that is in Welcome To. It's not in On Tour. But on Tour, you could play this game simultaneously with every human being on Earth if you were on camera, because everyone could print out a map of the U.S. from the website, and one person could be on camera rolling the dice. And while you're not likely to do that, I found at game nights it is really nice to have a few games that scale like this, because people trickle into the game nights. You don't know exactly how many people are going to show up sometimes, and just have one game that any number of people can play. That's why we got Welcome to the Table so much early on, because if I had 15 people show up at game night, we could all play that game at the beginning of the night and then split off and do other games for the rest of the night. At the same time, you lose the interaction. You lose things like in Ganz Schon Clever, we have the dice drafting. That is a huge part of the game. In Cartographers, you would lose that element of passing your entire map to the left or the right to have that interaction with monsters. So while I love the infinite scaling in some of these games, I'm starting to see the light in other roll and write games having different types of interaction that don't scale infinitely, but still make the games really, really good. So I'm curious to hear your preferences. What are a few of your favorite roll and write games? Do you prefer pencil and paper, or do you prefer the white erase method? Do you have the same kind of perception about roll and write games, that they shouldn't be too expensive? And do you prefer the infinitely scaling versions of these games, or do you prefer versions of these games that have some sort of interaction with the game, whether it's like drafting or like the monsters and Cartographers? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that in the comments below. Thanks.